Morning, everyone. My name is Matt Lindburg. I'm with Brown Caldwell, and Brown Caldwell is sponsoring this morning's Water for Breakfast session, and we're really excited to do so. We're excited that Water Congress gave us this opportunity to talk a little bit about the water plan and to hear from a number of different folks about their interest in the water plan and what they would like to see happen in the water plan update. We're going to be presenting a session that was recorded earlier. It was a fairly lengthy and very rich session, and we're piecing together the most salient points from that session in creating this video for you today. The panel discussion really builds on some listening sessions that the CWCB hosted in early June that focused on agriculture, municipal water use and conservation, environmental and rec issues, and forest health. If you're interested in learning more about the water plan update, I'd encourage you to look at engagecwcb.org. It's a website that the CWCB is set up to help enhance feedback and public interaction on the water plan update. But before we get to the panel discussion, I'll turn it over to Russ Sands for some words of opening.
Thanks so much, Matt. No, I'm very excited, and you're right. We did have a great conversation with panelists. I'm really excited to highlight some of that here today with you as well. Russ Sands, CWCB, the section chief for our water supply planning section. And before we get rolling, I will turn things over to our deputy section chief, Kat Weismiller.
Hi, I'm Kat Weismiller, Deputy Section Chief in Water Supply Planning at the CWCB, and I'll be helping as we go forward with the BIP updates and the water plan update with some project management. And today I'll be doing a lot of logistics, so I'm going to be turning my video off, but I just wanted to say hello. We'll be kicking it off with Becky Mitchell, Director of the CWCB. Here we go.
In Colorado, we take pride in our iconic mountains, forests, rivers, lakes, snow, and vast wild areas. Sustaining Colorado's water is not just important for the environment, but for our cities, farms, and way of life. As the state's agency charged with creating water policy and implementing programs to conserve, develop, protect, and manage Colorado's water for present and future generations, the Colorado Water Conservation Board created the state's first water plan in 2015. This plan acts as our official guidebook to creating a strong and sustainable water future. It presents opportunities for all industries and sectors in Colorado that rely on water to come together with the 9 river basin roundtables and local communities and collaborate on multi-beneficial projects. The water plan focuses on high-level goals for enhancing water storage and supply, conservation and land use, engagement and innovation, agricultural sustainability, and environment and recreation. Colorado is celebrating the 5th anniversary of the Water Plan and the 15th anniversary of the Interbasin Compact Committee and the Basin Roundtables in 2020. And the state's water community has certainly come a long way, completing hundreds of projects through support from our grant program since 2015. In the past 5 years since the first version of the water plan was created, the Colorado Water Conservation Board staff has worked with the water community across the state to address supply and demand gaps and develop new technologies to collect and analyze better data, such as a project cost estimation tool and an environmental flow tool. These tools allow the state to have a better grasp on future uncertainties as we continue to face more severe drought, more frequent wildfires, and other factors associated with the changing climate.
Sounds like some good words from Becky that really kick us off in the next direction. So with that, I think we'll kind of allow our panelists to talk a little bit. And what do you think about that, Matt?
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea, Russ. And we have Barb Biggs and Kevin Reidy to kick us off.
I would like to focus a little bit on conservation. Water conservation is absolutely critical, but it's not a silver bullet. You know, our friends in agriculture are often frustrated by this perception that 86% of the water in the state is used for agriculture. So clearly that's where we can go to solve the gap. But we all know that that's not a simple solution. Similarly, municipal conservation isn't a silver bullet to fill the municipal gap. It's important. We need to pursue it. We need to continue to make progress and use innovative ways to conserve water. And we all need to use water efficiently. Anytime anyone puts water to use in Colorado, whether it's irrigating an agricultural field, watering a park, or watering a yard or a tree, we're taking water out of the environment and putting it to human use. And we need to do that thoughtfully and efficiently. But we also need to remember that our parks and trees and yards are what make urban landscapes livable. It's important to recognize that many inner city families in Denver, Aurora, Fort Collins, Colorado Springs, Pueblo, the only opportunity they have, especially low-income city residents, and oftentimes people of color, the only opportunity they have to experience nature is in that neighborhood park or that community garden or that small piece of backyard or flower bed that they take care of around their own home. And we have to be inclusive and think about those uses of water as we move forward with continuing to make progress to fill the water supply gap.
Thanks, Barb. Yeah, I can't agree more. I think that's a really important part, is to kind of tee it off by saying that, water efficiency isn't about, killing trees and using no water. We need to use water, obviously. And I think that's a really important part of what we're trying to do. We were doing the last water plan, and it's also the next one. And as we've seen the last couple months, with the lack of open space and parks in cities, with the COVID response, we've seen a disproportionate effect on people of color not having access to open spaces like that. So I think that's definitely on the forefront of what we're talking about here with this next revision of the water plan. What we've been doing since 2016 from the first water plan update is really looking at this thing as a more holistic thing, not just seeing water conservation by itself, but integrating it into land use planning extensively, but also integrating water reuse into that as well. So kind of looking at that, trying to expand that picture a little bit, looking at more of a one water perspective, we can bring in this land use pattern, we bring in these alternative water sources, we can bring in how we look at cities and how we develop new subdivisions, and looking at the multi-use objectives of these green spaces, because I think that's a really important part of that, is that we can design a city or a new subdivision or a new kind of development looking at water efficiency as a core principle, while maintaining these open spaces, while they can do double, triple duty for stormwater, for flood mitigation, for open space, those kind of things. So I think that's really important to keep that in mind. But yeah, I agree. I think that's a big equity issue, can be addressed this one water framework, and looking at how we redesign, reallocate resources in our urban centers, but also design new more suburban style places. And also too, we can look and kind of connect to that agricultural picture as well, and look at urban agriculture in these settings too, is how do we incorporate some of these things into these new developments while conserving water. We know gardens in the city, they can use about 40% of what a bluegrass lawn uses for vegetables growing, and I think that's really important to kind of keep this tapestry in place and look at this stuff. And certainly we don't want to kill trees. That's just the worst thing we could possibly do, right? We need those trees to help with heat island effects and climate change as it approaches a critical mass. I think that we're going to see a different tree canopy 40 years from now, right, than we do now, and which I think is going to be necessary to happen. And that goes part and parcel with looking at how these land use patterns present themselves on the ground, and how we redevelop these things. Of course, we can keep on connecting these things to a bigger picture, obviously, but as we've seen during this pandemic as well, the extensive use of bicycling, right, and how people just stop driving cars. That's something to look at. If we redesign our cities in a certain way, we can use a whole lot less water and have a lot less climate impacts as well.
Some good words from Kevin. I really like how he tied in the tapestry. I feel like he kind of hit on everything and brought in environment and agriculture and kind of the municipal setting as well. It's just that's what the water plan's all about, isn't it?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And it's also about hearing a number of different perspectives. I mean, you don't hear that much a lot of times about the benefits of open space and how we use water in cities to enhance that environment. So I was glad to hear some of those perspectives. Very interesting. Now we'll hear some ag perspectives from Greg Peterson with the Colorado Ag Water Alliance and Alex Funk from the CWCB.
So we'd really like to see a water plan that explicitly identifies goals that can support agriculture in Colorado, really put out a blueprint of where projects, fundings, and what we can measure that can help us achieve those goals. I think that there's really a lot of potential here. And in the analysis and technical update in the water plan put out last year, the amount of water available for Colorado's farms and ranchers, it was identified as the second most important water-related issue from a statewide audience. And that's something that we really want to support. And when we talk about goals, well, what do we talk about? I mean, it's replacing aging infrastructure, reducing vulnerability to drought, maintaining ag viability in groundwater-dependent regions, developing more supply for irrigation, trying to do the most that we can to decrease the ag and water gap. And looking at plans relating to water and agriculture in other states, there's a lot of potential and opportunities that are out there that it doesn't seem like a lot of states have taken. And I think we have a really good chance here to do something new and interesting and just trying to figure out how to address these problems and how to support this community in our state. And that's going to take a lot. It's going to take a lot, and it's probably, and often I think just not talking about these goals, but when we talk about the agricultural community, it's presented as something far away. It's rural America. Instead, it would really be good to take the tone and highlight that agriculture is something we interact, we play in, we see, we eat, we benefit daily. And tell the story of agriculture by focusing less on talking about agriculture specifically and more about what are all the benefits that it provides to our state and our communities. So while it's part of our focus is on goals and metrics to support agricultural water use, let's draw attention to ecosystem services. I mean, that's a term that we, I think, in the ag community and out of the ag community, we talk about a lot. But it's hard to find data out there to really understand the benefits of certain practices with agriculture in general on return flows, and really trying to better understand what is that return flow from irrigation apart from base return flows, and just agriculture as food. I think that's something that sometimes we scratch our heads at, of like, well, we're not eating all this food ourselves. It's going to the rest of the community. And I mean, when we talk about drying up agriculture, I mean, we're really talking about exporting food production. And that's essentially what it is. And when you lose an acre of land that produces food, it isn't coming back.
You know, one thing that really stuck out to me, and, you know, we'll have to give Cindy Ware, who works at Department of Ag, the credit for this, but, you know, sort of recognizing that agriculture is the engine of the local state economy and that water is the fuel. I think there, you know, certainly needs to be sort of this discussion in the update, talking about places like the San Luis Valley, like the Republican Basin, where we're going to, you know, due to sort of these interstate water issues, they're facing, you know, sort of this prospect of, you know, sort of a huge reduction in irrigated acreage that has to potentially come out of production. And these are things that, you know, sort of are beyond the control of just a single state. And so I think it's kind of thinking about, you know, with those sort of like future projections and sort of, you know, more, you know, potentially these transitions to like, you know, dry land farming or sort of systems that use less water, you know, how do the economies in those places sort of adapt to those changes, and how, you know, how can we maybe kind of draw more connections around rural economic development and water resource management? And this is something that I certainly hope would be sort of a highlight of the update, is how, you know, how a natural resource agency or sort of groups that are more focused on natural resource issues maybe are working more closely with, say, like rural development groups or sort of economic development groups to sort of like think about how these sort of issues kind of like are, you know, being discussed in the same sentence and sort of same conversations. Because I think we have to be kind of thinking, Greg, to your point about being more creative about, you know, how we kind of adapt to those changes. And I think the other sort of challenge, you know, and hopefully this will be reflected as well in the update, is that, you know, agriculture is just so diverse in the state, and I think more than any other sector face almost like this gamut of issues depending on, you know, not only like the type of operation, but like kind of where you are in the state. So, you know, we have like these groundwater issues, we have like surface supply issues. And so it's sort of kind of capturing the fact that it's not going to be like a one solution fits all for the ag sector. I think we have to take in mind that, you know, depending on where we are in the state, and again, like, you know, kind of like the operational types and differences, we have to kind of be cognizant that, you know, what might work somewhere might not work somewhere else. I think finally, I'll just note that I think it's critical that we highlight the kind of important role ag plays in being a leader in solving some of these water resource issues. I think from the Eastern Plains, you know, to the Southwest, we're seeing farmers and ranchers working to sort of come up with creative solutions to some of these challenges. And so, you know, I want to highlight that, you know, ag has been really engaged in, for example, stream management plan leadership and participation, kind of working on getting, you know, more of an ag focus to those planning efforts. We have things like, you know, Paul Bruchet and the ranchers in Kremling who are moving forward with kind of looking at, you know, how alternative transfer methods and water sharing works in high elevation systems, and sort of informing how that, you know, kind of, you know, how we can better model those types of programs to, you know, kind of anticipate sort of any impacts to those types of operations. So I think, you know, kind of highlighting that, you know, given all these challenges, they can be kind of overwhelming, but the ag has played a really critical role in kind of being a leader in solving those, and really kind of like showing that work and that grassroots work as well in the update. So I think I'll close on that note, but really excited about the update process and working with producers to highlight some of those stories in the update.
Some really good points there, Matt. I think some standouts for me. I love Greg Peterson's passion about this topic, and just how he talks about, you know, maybe discussing agriculture in different ways, maybe different ways that resonate with people. And I think you heard from both of them a lot about this adaptation, and maybe it's adaptation in the way we talk about things, but just the real adaptation of things that might have to change, the costs associated with that, the potential impacts. And certainly that adaptation piece is something we've looked a lot through at the technical update, and then are thinking about in the water plan as well.
Oh, that's great, Russ. And adaptation, as we think about that, it really requires us to be innovative. And both Greg and Alex talked about being innovative, and provided some great examples of how ag is being innovative. And the other aspect of that is that ag is so integrated with other segments of water use, and recognizing that and recognizing those benefits. That was some really good stuff there.
We're hearing that same tapestry weaving, aren't we? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on now, we have Abby Burk from the National Audubon Society and Linda Bassi from CWCB, and they're going to provide some perspectives on environmental and rec issues.
So my thoughts for today's presentation and around the water plan kind of hinge around Colorado's rivers, and reflect not only wildlife's dependence on these systems, but ours as well. And just to kind of set the stage a bit, Audubon is invested in healthy rivers and wetlands for birds and people. Birds depend on rivers and riparian areas and wetlands. And in Colorado, as well as much of the Intermountain West, more than 80% of all wildlife species depend on wetland and riparian habitats. These habitats rely on water availability, so they are extremely responsive to climate change and drought and diversions, groundwater depletion, and other water management activities. And we are dependent on these freshwater habitats too, for clean drinking water, for irrigation water, for recreation, and ecological services and functions. You know, like surface and groundwater exchanges, flood attenuation, water purification and filtering. You know, in fact, roughly 80% of Colorado's drinking water comes from forested watersheds. And healthy watersheds support healthy rivers, and all of us, people, birds, and other wildlife, depend upon both every single day. And so it's not surprising that healthy rivers was a top issue for Coloradans during the drafting of the 2015 water plan. With changes to our hydrology, changes in demographics and water use and a growing population, Colorado needs a responsive and actionable water plan for protecting our state's brand, or kind of like what I like to think about, what makes our state so unique. And arguably, it's our rivers and all that they support. Healthy flowing rivers and waterways are also big business and are the backbone of Colorado's economic infrastructure and resilience. In Colorado, Business for Water Stewardship reports in 2020 that statewide water-based recreation generates $18.8 billion annually and supports more than 131,000 jobs. Now, agriculture is also a significant economic driver in our state, and it contributes around $41 billion to the Colorado economy annually and employs 173,000 people. Recreation and agriculture depend on healthy, clean flowing rivers. These industries both need each other and both depend on healthy river ecosystems to thrive. The water plan sets goals and objectives around stream and watershed management plans to cover 80% of priority rivers and streams in stream management planning efforts by 2030. We need to define what we are fully doing to reach this meaningful objective. To date, there are 24 stream management plans over the last 5 years, and that's running statewide. These stream management plans are born from collaborative engagement, often across different water sectors, from conservation groups sitting down with watershed groups and municipalities and agriculture and others coming together over their river. And often rivers are the central identity of a community, a common point of connection. These stream management plans are a good start, and with so much at stake, from drinking water to irrigation water to maybe favorite river surfing waves if you're a kayaker like me, Colorado's rivers need state-of-the-science-based river health assessments to make sure our rivers are supported through protection or managed improvements, and making progress actionable and updatable and trackable to meet and exceed the goals that are spelled out in the water plan. And as climate change touches ground in a very real way through wildfires, such as the Pine Gulch fire, which is closest to me in our small dryland ranch, and the Grizzly Creek fire in Glenwood Springs, our watershed, river, and riparian health is more important than ever. Glenwood Springs is down half of its water supply and will be impacted by ash and debris flows in the river for perhaps years to come. River health and our water supply reliability are undeniably connected. And another point of connection, with the recent economic downturn due to the COVID-19 pandemic, people from all backgrounds and walks of life have been more connected to our rivers, waterways, and public land than I have ever observed. This summer, my local reach of the Colorado River has been brimming with people of every age and economic and cultural background. And so I feel that investment in healing our rivers and the environment is central to economic recovery and investment in our shared future to the benefit of everyone. So just to sum up, the decisions we make about river health impact all of Colorado. We are all connected by water. The future of Colorado is dependent on clean, reliable water coming from healthy rivers and watersheds, and each of us are connected by it. And I feel that now is the time for Coloradans to come together and expand this investment in river health and strategic projects to sustain rivers. The water plan and Basin implementation plan updates are outstanding opportunities to invest in river health. And when we do, we invest in Colorado. So Linda, I'd love to turn it over to you for your further thoughts around river health. Thanks for letting me share mine.
Abby, I strongly agree with your statement about looking at what's happening in our state this summer. We're facing drought and fires, and it just points out how vital it is to work together to meet our environmental needs and make our streams more resilient. And so I am hopeful that with this water plan update, we'll be equipped to do that. I do agree with your emphasis on the fact that rivers benefit everyone in our state in so many different ways. both from the water supply perspective and from people just being out and enjoying the sound of a river. Just every sector needs a healthy river. And I think that over the last 5 years, it's shown that we can get a lot done working together. And the plans that are in place now, the stream management plans and integrated water management plans, are a really good start on getting a lot of that work done. And I'm hoping that with this update, that the tools that are being discussed and developed, whether it's the environmental flow tool or the rapid river health assessments and others that are being discussed, can help us identify a baseline at varying levels. There's been a lot of talk about it, identifying the environmental and recreational gap. I think it's very challenging to do on a statewide level, and that it would be more effective for people to do it on a more local level, which is also how we get more done, by working together, working with our communities, and really digging in. And I'm really hopeful that that's what we can do. There are a lot of good working relationships that have been formed in implementing the water plan, and that this work can continue.
Yeah, so many good thoughts there. I really love the idea of just connectivity and how rivers really unite us all. And water, I had the quote here that healthy waterways are big business too, and really kind of touching on that economic vitality. But I think the thing that strikes me so much is just really learning to look through the lens of the other. You know, there's a lot of comments in there about agriculture and other pieces too. And really it is the balance of all those things.
No, that's right. And also I appreciated the perspective of looking at local needs, because every stream segment is different and has different hydrology and different hydraulics and different needs. So I thought that was good. And I also liked Abby's mention that healthy rivers protect our state's brand. Really, so many aspects of our state are dependent on healthy rivers. And healthy rivers are dependent on healthy forests. And so with that little transition, we have Mike Preston and Chris Sturm to provide some perspectives on forest health.
I spent 12 years as chair of the Southwest Basin Roundtable, and congruent with that, and obviously worked our way through the water plans, and then congruent with that, I managed the Dolores Waters Conservancy District, which it manages the third largest reservoir in Colorado. So the forest health is really a subject that's near and dear to my heart. I guess as far as our hopes for the water plan, one thing that we would like is to increase the water plan focus on support for landscape scale forest health management, to enhance water quality and availability, to protect water infrastructure, and to advance the well-being of economically vibrant and fire-adapted communities, along with benefits to wildlife and recreation. Secondly, we really would like to emphasize making funding available to support these priorities via implementation grants and enabling roundtables to advance water supply reserve fund applications directed at forest health, and also by leveraging other state, federal, and NGO funding and expertise because this forest health is going to be a major challenge that we're going to have to be focused on over a long period of time. The other thing I think the plan can do is to promote critical relationships and alignments with drought contingency planning, with shared stewardship, which is really state, federal, and local cooperation on forest health, the Colorado Energy Office with regard to the carbon cycle and climate change, Colorado State Forest Service and Natural Resources Conservation Service, and the Forest Health Advisory Council. So we have we have institutions out there that are working hard on these issues, and the water plan is a great opportunity to tie those together. And then I guess I'd like to conclude by, in support of establishing, getting through the water plan, establishing protocols to monitor water quality and quantity responses to proactive forest health treatments And this should be in cooperation with the Forest Service Rocky Mountain Restoration Station, Colorado Forest Restoration Institute at CSU, and other researchers. And I think those are kind of our hopes for the plan, and I'd like to turn it over to Chris.
All right, thanks a lot, Mike. Really appreciate those comments, and very well organized. And I agree with all of them, and have some similar thoughts, and would really like to support landscape scale projects that you mentioned for forest health initiatives. And the vision that I have for this is really connecting our forest health collaboratives with our watershed groups as well. And I think this can be done in a way where we can merge traditional forest health planning that could be a pre-fire mitigation plan with a watershed assessment that then identifies and prioritizes discrete projects around the watershed that can be done in conjunction to promote overall health. So that could be a forest health project designed to mitigate burn severity, being coupled with a project, say, on some agricultural lands to restore stream channels so that a producer can have better access to their water. For example, in some areas we have such degradation of stream channels that it's hard for wells or pumping in the channel itself to operate well. So through restoration, we can elevate those beds, channel beds, so that our producers can better access that water. At the same time, we're also giving that channel better connectivity to its floodplain. So in the event of some catastrophic fire followed by floods, we can have the sediment have better access to the floodplain and store it there instead of the next downstream reservoir, or it could be a bunch of diversions downstream that are impacted by all that sediment and debris. So really, by looking at landscape scale projects, we can mitigate burn severity, hopefully mitigate the amount of sediment that might be coming down after a fire. But we should also be thinking about the health of our stream network so that it can mitigate those impacts too. Ultimately, I believe this will make us more flood and fire resilient. I think it can also make us more drought resilient. If we have better access to our floodplains with our stream channels, we can restore our aquifers. And that also is of great benefit to a lot of our producers that are having problems with wells or direct pumping, or even diversions that are not functioning as well as they were designed to function as the stream channels change. And finally, I'll wrap it up by saying that monitoring is going to be incredibly important as we implement new innovative projects. Not everything's going to function the way we think it might. Some things might do a lot better. Some things might not do as well as we hope that they'll do. So continued monitoring of our projects is going to be important. And then I'd be remiss in saying that the CWCB has programs, including Colorado Watershed Restoration Program, that can help fund all of these efforts that we've talked about. And it is my hope that through our update to the water plan and the basin implementation plans, that we connect more of these on-the-ground groups that are implementing projects with our folks at the basin roundtable level that are making policy decisions.
Wow, a lot of good thoughts there. And I think I would be remiss not to mention that at the time we recorded a lot of this, just all the fires going on across the state, including what is now the largest fire in Colorado's history. And I think we heard a lot about that kind of resilience to fire, flood, and drought. Of course, drought is a major issue in the state this year as well. But one of the things that stands out to me in that conversation a lot, and something I think we continue to hear a lot about, is if some of these conversations are looking through each other's lens, but it's also just understanding the volume of work and the body of work that's been done. I think I've heard Chris Sturm talk a lot before about the state of the science, and just understanding and getting our hands around what we know, what we don't know, what's already going on, what are the groups that we should be connecting. And I like Mike Preston saying that the water plan was a good opportunity to tie those efforts together.
Yeah. Both of them brought up landscape scale projects, and so it really sort of brought home for me the need to recognize interconnectedness. Because when you have a landscape scale project, there's probably a lot of people that are thinking about that project, a lot of stakeholders that are dependent on the lands that are within the scope of a project, and so really kind of bringing all those folks together, bringing good ideas together to help maximize the benefit of projects that are actually implemented on the ground. So good stuff. I think now we'll transition to some Q&A for our panelists. And our first question is from Celine Hawkins, who is a CWCB board director.
I'm Celine Hawkins. I'm chair of the Colorado Water Conservation Board. One of the lessons we've learned in 2020 is that we need to do a better job on diversity, equity, and inclusion in our work. How will the water plan take in more diverse viewpoints, more genders, and our tribal nations' perspectives in our work?
I mean, I think the critical things are just really listening and learning. I mean, I think there's like this desire to, like, myself included, to jump right into reaching out to some of these more historically underrepresented producers in the state. But, you know, I think also taking the time to research, getting a sense of, you know, the complex issues that are affecting these communities is like really critical to becoming a better ally, as well as sort of like listening more before kind of working towards or sort of suggesting, you know, paths forward. And so I think but at the same time, I think it's really important that the update does reflect that diversity of agriculture, you know, kind of highlighting things like the unique acequia communities in southern Colorado, talking more with tribes, you know, particularly on issues that, you know, are kind of beyond like interstate water management, but, you know, they're also grappling with infrastructure challenges just like other producers.
Celine, I'd like to jump in as well and just kind of offer some thoughts. We definitely need targeted outreach to communities that have been historically left out of some of these water conversations. And, you know, even an effort that, you know, that we have been pivoting towards more as Audubon and the conservation community is, how do we prioritize, you know, inviting Black, Indigenous, and people of color individuals to present and share their stories? We participate in a Water for Colorado coalition, and some of our partners are connecting with Latinx and Native communities to increase their participation in the water plan and the Basin implementation update process, to kind of amplify their voices and their stories. And just quickly, I'd love to also give a acknowledgement of the meaningful work that one of our local chapters, the Arkansas Valley Audubon Society, is doing by purposefully collaborating, engaging with local Latinx community members on restoration and engagement around Fountain Creek. The decisions we make around water really do affect everyone. And as we as a water community, you know, need to double down our efforts to bring more diverse chairs, you know, to a bigger water decision-making table, you know, so that our water decisions truly do reflect all of us. So thanks for a great question.
Celine, if I could also add, I think it's important that we celebrate our successes. I think the Greenway Foundation, for example, and the summer camps that they've hosted that unfortunately had to be suspended this year, but they're summer camps that bring inner city, oftentimes largely minority, people of color communities down to the river to interact. I think the way we build more diversity is to start with the young people that will be our water leaders tomorrow. I think if you take a look at what Denver is doing with the National Western Complex redevelopment. If you're not familiar with the National Western Complex, it sits right in the heart of the Globeville and Swansea, Elyria neighborhoods in North Denver, which have traditionally been low-income, predominantly minority, Latinx, and people of color communities. And that redevelopment is going to incorporate water quality improvements, you know, stormwater infrastructure to improve water quality in the river, opening up and bringing people down to the South Platte River, clinics and extension offices and classrooms for Colorado State University and Metro State University. I mean, it's really an exciting opportunity the more we bring people together to appreciate the value of water, the more engaged and diverse our population is going to get. You know, I would like to echo what Abby said. Every sector deserves a healthy river. And I think we have had some successes on Fountain Creek in the Colorado Springs Pueblo area, in the Lower Nark, along the South Platte and along Cherry Creek in Denver, where we've really made those rivers corridors that everyone can love and enjoy?
I thought a really good question, a profound question. I agree, it's timely. And I often think about just our roundtables and the diversity there, just who knows about the roundtables, and really trying to get the word out, beyond the roundtables, or drive people to the roundtables, drive people to the water plan. I'm really hopeful that in this update process, we'll increasingly be able to get, as we move forward and have drafts and look out to 2022, that we can really engage a broader audience into that discussion.
Yeah, Russ, you brought up the roundtables. I've heard lots of folks from the roundtables say that one of the biggest benefits of that whole framework is just the communication and hearing from a lot of folks about their water needs and their concerns. And as we broaden that discussion, I think it'll give us a better appreciation for how we're all interconnected within the scope of water in the state. And so regarding interconnectedness, our next question is from Becky Mitchell.
Hello, panelists. The strength of Colorado's water plan comes not just from identifying needs in one sector, but also identifying how various sectors, plans, and projects can work to support all of Colorado's water needs. You've each talked about the needs in various sectors, but can you speak to the importance of integration, collaboration, and building partnerships?
Thanks, Becky, for the great question. And, as we've been talking about throughout the panel discussion about how water connects all of us, as our water resources and rivers stretch to support our needs in light of dwindling and variable resources due to climate change and other pressures, collaboration and building trusting partnerships are key, and especially a key in prioritizing true multi-benefit projects, because as we know, the needs around one water sector affects the needs of another. And we accomplish far more by working together. And we make good balanced progress together. But just recently, Audubon is in support of a Trout Unlimited project to reclaim a storage pool that will increase water availability for agricultural irrigation users. And that in fact also benefits birds that are dependent upon shallow water lakes and wetlands for stopover, migratory, or breeding habitat here on the West Slope. And so this project will further help support Colorado's in-stream flow releases to gain benefit for fish. So it's a win for sure, for ag, for birds and fish and river flows. And this project might not have been possible if any of the participants, weren't working together on this. And so collaboration, partnership, and trust building are really key to see this progress going forward.
Abby, that sounds like a great project. Partnerships and collaboration are what it's all about to getting things done with water, well, with anything. And CWCB has entered into some really productive partnerships with agricultural water users, to, for example, leases of water for in-stream flow use, where it's a split season arrangement. Irrigation happens early in the season, and then the water is used for in-stream flows in the later part of the season. We've also partnered with water suppliers to be able to protect reservoir releases under our in-stream flow program. And I think that we need to keep finding more projects like that where we can work together to meet more than one need.
With regard to forest health, one of our major objectives is to protect and enhance watersheds and storage reservoirs that supply all users. And at the same time, and this is something that we spend a lot of time on in the roundtable and on our collaboratives, we want to be supporting stream health that's vital to riparian and aquatic species, wildlife, livestock forage, and recreational uses. And so I think one of the things within our Forest Health Collaborative and the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative, we really try to treat all of these water uses on an equal footing. And the other thing that our roundtable has done is has adopted, the Southwest Basin Roundtable has adopted forest health as part of our drought contingency planning. We believe that investments in forest health are one of the best investments we can make in terms of dealing with drought contingency. And we're recommending that the Colorado Water Plan consider placing the same emphasis on forest health as a drought contingency measure.
I'll add something really quickly. To make something stick, whatever scale it's at, I think it's really essential. It's got to come from the place that wants to do it, the local community, the group, the regional community, whatever it is. It's got to come from them. Projects that are handed from the top down, in my experience, usually don't last or don't have the impact you'd like.
Really good thoughts again. You can't go it alone today, can you, Matt? It's a group effort, and if you try to, you're gonna miss some opportunities, and at a minimum, I think not take advantage of all the great collaboration and the good opportunities you could achieve if you could work together.
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of an interesting progression of questions too. We talked a little bit about hearing from a number of different folks, and then as you hear from folks, you discover ways that your needs or your desires are interconnected, and then can develop strategies and projects that recognize that. And really the foundation of all that is education. And so that sort of leads to our next question then from Bethany Howell.
Bethany Howell with the Rio Grande Basin Roundtable. I am the Public Education Participation and Outreach Liaison, and I'm very honored to be able to ask you a question today regarding education and outreach. Part of the process for basin planning is understanding how education and outreach can support each area of the Colorado Water Plan, finding ways to increase collaboration across the state, particularly across basins, to amplify our education and outreach efforts. How do you use education, outreach, and engagement to maximize success in your efforts? And do you have any concrete examples you can share that might help provide some lessons learned for the benefit of others?
We work with so many watershed groups and forest health groups around the state that have education and outreaches in their mission statements, and work with many different volunteers and youth groups to implement their initiatives, implement their projects. So a concrete example that I have that I see play out all over the state is a group coming together to implement a project. It could be a forest health project, or in many cases it could be a riparian revegetation project in the watershed. And you bring together lots of different folks from the local community that have different backgrounds and different disciplines to do the work. But in order to do the work, there's an education component to teach them how to do the work correctly, and also to discuss why the work is important. So as that group is implementing the project throughout the day, they're listening to professionals discuss the importance of it. And that has an impact that I have seen over the years on the local community, and that these volunteers will feel very good about what they accomplished at the end of the day, and bring everything that they learned back into their community and discuss it with their friends and their colleagues and their families. So that has a really far-reaching impact.
So just following on Chris's remarks, the collaboratives are really the kind of the local participatory process in our area, or at the core of that. And there, as I mentioned before, there are 3 of them. They conduct open meetings, field trips, educational events, there's media coverage, and each of the collaboratives has a website. So that's sort of our kind of the local framework within which we do kind of education and outreach. The other kind of really interesting thing that has emerged out of the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative is, in addition to the 3 focal areas, starting with Southwest Colorado and including the Upper South Platte and the Upper Arkansas, we have a series of subcommittees that are discussing cross-cutting issues related to the advancement of forest health. And in fact, one of those groups is focuses on education and outreach. We're trying to address social license, workforce development, and biomass utilization. And one of the things that one of the ways we've really benefited from this subcommittee level communication is we get to hear from others around the state that are tackling similar issues. I mean, I'm always interested in the contrast with how you step up, how you address forest health in a rural environment versus kind of in an urban environment. So we've learned from each other. And then the other thing that has happened as a result of these, kind of statewide subcommittees, and these are all virtual, is that we've been able to get top level state and federal leadership and expertise, as well as researchers and practitioners in the private sector to join these discussions. And so that has really, I think that going at this both locally and then having the benefit of a kind of a statewide support system and dialogue, the combination of those two have really benefited our efforts, and I believe the efforts of others in addressing forest health.
Bethany, if I could, I'd like to talk about your cultural interests in the lower South Platte Basin to learn about the challenges that municipalities face, municipal water providers face, and vice versa. Municipalities learned a lot about how what the challenges are for the agricultural interests along the river. And I think the South Platte River Regional Opportunities Water Group is really an outgrowth that shows that collaboration. The more we as roundtables can communicate across basin lines, the more we start to realize that, you know, we're all in this together. It's not a West Slope, East Slope, it's a Colorado issue.
Yeah, it's education is just so important. And I think, you know, I'm reminded in listening to this how it's really a two-way street. You know, every time we're, you know, talking to folks and we're trying to spread the word about something or push something, we're learning too. You know, whether I'm talking to Don Schwinn in the Southwest or Deb Daniels in the Republican or Nicole Seltzer in the Yampa, like, I'm constantly learning things, and maybe also just learning perspectives and stories that I think are so important to share across the state.
Yeah, and there are so many different perspectives out there. You know, a lot of times we think about education, it's maybe more of a broad brush, but hearing those local perspectives and getting local buy-in and participation in projects, as Chris described, I thought that was a good perspective. It gives the local folks a lot more ownership in a project and can be much more impactful that way. So. Great stuff. So the next topic of discussion is a little bit different, and it's focused on climate. And we'll hear our question from Megan Holcomb.
Hello, panelists and Water Congress. This is Megan Holcomb with the Colorado Water Conservation Board. The 2015 Water Plan mentions the effects of climate change in nearly every chapter. However, there are only two critical actions that are listed in the 2015 plan, both of which are enormous in scope and lack actionable specificity. So where do you, as experts in your own fields, see opportunities for your sector to advance climate mitigation and adaptation projects with more specificity? I look forward to your responses and hope to see you soon.
Oh, Megan, thanks for the easy question. I think you're absolutely correct. And I think if we could get one major advance in water planning in the state would be to do exactly that. Talk about how do we mitigate climate change and how do we develop adaptation projects. I think anything we can do to make our systems more resilient, educate our residents, especially those of us who are municipal water providers, educate our residents on just how precious this water is, and that water you use now means it's water that's not up there in storage for use next year if this dry spell continues. And we've absolutely got to get this message across that we've got to do better, but I'm not sure I know what to do specifically other than encouraging wise water use. I think Kevin raised some great ideas earlier about viewing water as one water, so that stormwater isn't just something we pipe away and get rid of, but we use it to either supplement our supplies or make sure that our rivers and streams and gulches are designed so that those stormwater events, when they come, can support a vibrant riparian environment. Every model I've ever looked at said our drier times are going to be drier and our storms are going to be more intense. How to do better now so that we're prepared to adapt in the future. Kevin?
Yeah. Yep. Hey, thanks, Barb. I can't agree more. Yeah, that's, so, since I focus on urban water efficiency, that is really, I look at long-term water efficiency. There's a difference between drought and water efficiency, right? Long-term water efficiency prepares you for
drought, yeah,
as well as future climate change, right? And this is the work that you put into this stuff ahead of time to adapt and mitigate this stuff. And I think as Barb said, the resilience part of that is really huge. You know, making sure that our urban environments are much more resilient to climate change, and that includes, as we mentioned before, talking about changing landscapes, right? And how do you, you know, keep these open spaces, these green spaces, as we call them, green spaces, and tree canopy in the face of climate change. And that's something that when you redesign or design new places like this, you're talking about urban landforms and things like that. And you're talking about the connection to these rivers with stormwater as well. And as Barb rightly pointed to, is that, you know, we're going to have, you know, the drier times will be drier and the storms could be much bigger. Right now we've got wildfires all over the West, plus 2 hurricanes hitting the Gulf Coast. I mean, this is insane right now. And this is the future to come. And so we've got to be able to adapt our cities. I think it's really about making, you know, especially outdoor use resilient, and really using obviously less water, but using it in a better, more efficient manner, so we can still have the same quality of life that we're trying to live through now, and that we don't exacerbate the issue with climate change.
I guess I'll just add, you know, right now, like a major focus at the state level has been sort of, you know, how do natural working land solutions fit into this like broader framework of how the state can meet its climate, like greenhouse gas reduction goals. And so I think there's been a lot of interest in sort of looking at ecosystem markets, you know, be it through, you know, carbon sequestration through the adoption of soil health measures, which has been a, you know, kind of a big focus of looking at cover crops and conservation tillage. And, you know, these practices have really critical co-benefits like water conservation and creating wildlife habitat. And so I think, you know, as well as potentially generating revenue streams for producers in rural communities. And kind of tying this all the way back to, you know, what we kind of talked about at the beginning of this call, and kind of thinking about, you know, in a scenario where we have maybe less water available for, you know, kind of traditional irrigated ag, you know, could some of these like climate solutions provide some additional like offsetting like revenue generation to help kind of like keep ag viable? And so I think there's a lot of interest in that, and I think really the next step is really kind of getting some of the larger scale pilots and kind of looking at this in a bigger scale, because, you know, there are some challenges in a more arid state to sort of how these things look at, but, you know, this has been kind of a, I think, real interest. And I think there's even some connections with the forest, you know, management too, you know, kind of looking at things like biochar and sort of that application, and that can be like a revenue source for private forests. Anyway, I think there's a lot of interesting ways you can kind of work that private land ownership and how that affects climate change solutions.
You do have farmers and ranchers throughout the state who are doing great work on their lands with amazing practices, whether it's conservation tillage, crop residue management, cover crops. Just a big issue is just cost of trying to implement these practices and the risk with that. And I mean, there's the ones who aren't doing that are running into those barriers. And I mean, supporting the research and the use of drought-tolerant varieties of crops, there's a lot of very interesting work being done in that right now. And in storage, I think we say it quite a bit, but I just think of my own small little operation. Given how this year is, the ditch that I'm on, I mean, we have storage water. If we didn't have storage water right now, I'd be saying, well, this was fun. I guess I'll start up again in 2022. And that is what it allows these businesses to do that. I don't know any business that can just give up an entire year's of income, but most of these producers are prepared to do that, and they do that. And storage really helps get through that.
I'd like to add something from environmental projects perspective. I think in the face of climate change, it's really important to look at our healthy stream habitats and get some protection in place for them. For example, flows that will support healthy riparian communities will make streams more resilient when we have these hard years. Also, it's important for us to remember that we have some flexible tools. In-stream flow program has flexible tools for temporary leases of water for in-stream flow use, where we can partner with ag producers who are seeing that they really aren't going to be able to produce a viable crop in a given year. And we can partner with them and pay them for their water so that they'll achieve some economic benefit, and we can use that water to help streams that are experiencing really low flows.
one of the things that I'm encouraged by is the shared stewardship discussion that's going on between state and federal government. There's beginning to be discussion of carbon-based forest planning, and I think that would be something that could be promoted through the water plan. As you know, the release of carbon from large wildfires is massive, and we're all breathing that kind of as we speak. You know, prescribed fires release carbon in a more controlled manner, and then really being able to convert excess biomass into energy and biochar, then you're starting to get even more controlled emissions. So I think the way that we kind of manage our forest health treatments, we've really got to keep the carbon cycle front and center. Finally, the climate change has really exacerbated bug invasions, and so we've had thousands of acres of bug die-off, you know, on the San Juan forest. I'm sure you've all experienced that on your forests. So, I mean, one of the things that we need to focus on is doing whatever we can to process and clean up kind of the dead trees. And as we get these sites cleaned up, then we should go through another stage of tree planting and really get the next generations of trees coming along to contribute what they contribute to managing the carbon cycle.
You know, I think about in the 2015 in the water plan, you know, we had these 5 scenarios, these 5 variant visions of the future. And those were largely just narratives at the time. And of course, you know, our challenge in the analysis and technical update was to turn those narratives into numbers. And so now, you know, that data is out, and we've turned that over to the roundtables, and it's out there for review by anyone. But we have, you know, that difference in 3 of those scenarios where we have more climate change, and in 2 of them where we have quite a bit of warming. You can really see those impacts to hydrology like play out, and really look at the risk to, you know, environment, the risk to muni, the risk to ag, and kind of look at that. So when I think about how to make that actionable, I think maybe now is no better of a time to kind of look at what those variant impacts could be and kind of use that to plan against.
Yeah, no, that's right. And needing to be resilient in the future and needing to be adaptable is really going to be very important. And thanks to all of our panelists. I thought this was a really good session, and we need to hear more of this. We want to hear from a variety of folks as the water plan is updated. That's going to be critically important. And we'll be in the coming months doing more activities to reach out to folks, hear your opinions, your needs, your desires, and getting your input on the water plan update. So Russ, you have some words of closing for us?
I think you hit it, Matt. Great job. And again, I will just echo what you said. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Thank you to staff, especially as well, for really taking a leadership role and driving some of these efforts right there alongside many of our great members and stakeholders across the state. The roundtable members certainly are leading the charge at the local level. And it really is this convergence and meeting in the middle and trying to find new ways that we can collaborate and wrap our heads around what is this water plan update going to look like. And I think that as we progress over the next year, we're really going to dig into that more, and I'm very excited about the process. So thanks everybody for your time today, and please if you get a chance, check out engagecwcb.org for more information, and we'll keep you posted as we move along.